Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. Today we're going to be talking about my favourite tropes in horror, and I'm going to be giving examples with books and movies for each specific trope that I present. Stay tuned. Okay everyone, tropes are used to describe plot points, themes, plot devices, and anything basically that you will find in a story. They cover characters, they cover settings, they cover pretty much everything, and they're universally recognized from someone actually reading a book, and it's specifically a genre. So you're not going to find horror tropes so much in romance novels, but someone reading a horror novel and it's about, let's say, a haunted house, they can expect to see that trope in that story. There's so many, covers characters, themes, character settings, pretty much a little bit of everything. So it's highly unlikely you'll be able to read a story without seeing some of your favorite tropes there. Now tropes have also mainly got quite a bad reputation, because it is stuff that has been done over and over again, and then it becomes cliche. But the thing to do when you are writing is to actually turn that trope around, subvert it, to create something original, and then it's not going to be cliche anymore. You have to be creative, you have to be original if you're a writer, and if you're a reader, you want to see something different, and you want to see some kind of subversion of that trope, and not just the usual thing. For example, in a haunted house, if you're reading a novel about a haunted house, you don't want to hear every single time about noises coming out of the walls at night, or strange banging. That has become cliche. So you want to do something different with that as a writer, so the reader can experience something fresh. Okay, for the first two tropes that I'm going to be talking about, they're both tropes based on setting. And the first one is my favourite subgenre of horror, which is post-apocalyptic horror. And that is where you have a ruined, decimated landscape, maybe cracked earth, poisonous earth, and where the buildings have been absolutely and utterly destroyed and now just ruins. And it is a danger to live there and to survive there. And the first example of a book that I've read, and that is my favourite book, and that is Swan Song, where the earth, where the world has been absolutely annihilated through nuclear devastation, and there's a nuclear fallout and a winter, and it's absolutely beautifully captured in this novel. And that setting tells a story in itself that is basically so devastating of what has happened to the world, to the earth, and the survivors have to somehow eke out a living on the planet we used to call Earth. Another excellent example is The Wastelands from Stephen King. I spoke about it in my last video, and the thing that really appeals to me is the setting. Also, apparently the world has moved on, has left this desolate landscape, also that has suffered some terrible either nuclear catastrophe, but the land is poisonous, the people are absolutely barbaric, and it's just a fantastic novel, and a great example of this particular kind of trope with this particular kind of setting. Now I couldn't think of any horror movies that have captured the setting of a ruined, devastated landscape, but I can think of two action movies maybe, number one being The Matrix, and number two being Terminator, where the world has been ravaged by machines. And I think that's two good examples of this setting. Okay, and my second favourite setting trope thing is creepy carnivals and circuses. Now, when you go to a circus or a carnival and you walk through the door as a young child, you are bombarded with sights and sounds and colour and music, which actually I find kind of creepy, that karaoke music, and this is kind of oddly disturbing in itself. It's almost like an overload of the senses. And then you have all the carny folk who are strange. They're strangers to us. We don't know them. The circus comes, the circus goes. Unknown. And you go to these rides, you go to roller coasters. How safe are they really? How close is it where you go up on the roller coaster from a delightful laughter to a scream? And the sort of point with this circus and this carnival thing is that it is so close with the magic and the mystery to fear and terror. And basically the clowns speak for themselves, and the characters that you find in a carnival speak for themselves. It is something eerie. You go to the house of horror, you go to the mirrors that distort you. There is so much in carnivals that is just perfect for horror writers to capture and to take and to turn into a horror movie or book. And that is why I like creepy carnivals. Now for examples, first of all, just for one book, an absolute classic, and I mentioned it before on my channel, and that is Ray Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes. It's an awesome coming of age story set in a creepy carnival, and highly recommended. Now for a movie, I decided to go with a mini-series, and that is simply called Carnival, and I cannot recommend this highly enough. It's an absolutely epic tale, good versus evil, but it's this young man traveling with this carnival, and it is just absolutely epic and creepy, and it's got a bit of everything. Okay, my next favorite trope is monsters, but more specifically something original that is done with monsters. I love vampires and werewolves and witches just as much as the next person, but sometimes it is a little bit overused and you want something just a little bit original and a little bit different. And nobody does that better than Clive Barker. In The Hellbound Heart you have Pinhead, and in Cabal, which was turned into a film called Nightbreed, you have a range of different creatures that are so creative, that are so original. And in fact, in every novel that he writes, you're never going to get the normal, just a werewolf or a zombie. He's going to do something interesting. He's going to do something original with your monster idea. And I love that. Similarly, for movies, we got CANDYMAN, also by Clive Barker, based on one of his stories, short stories, called The Forbidden, in the Books of Blood. And that's a completely original take on this giant man, this hook for a hand, that stages he's covered in bees. It is just so original. And then, okay, something a little bit more common, but a beautiful take on the vampire story, and that is Let the Right One In. And it is bloody, and it is vicious, and it is dark, and as far as I'm concerned, that's the way it's supposed to be. Vampires are not supposed to sparkle, in my opinion. Next up, we have my take on what is called the final girl trope. Now, I'm not a fan of slasher movies, but I'm sure most of you are recognized with this idea of the final girl. That's all the rest of the girls and the boys get killed, especially if they have sex with each other, and there's one girl left that survives at the end of the day. I want to take it a bit further, and I'm not trying to score any brownie points with any of you out there, but I like to see a strong, resourceful, intelligent woman placed in a terrifying circumstance, horrifying circumstance, and she has to find a way to survive. And she does survive. So you have the strong heroine in horror, which is kind of rare. But one book, I can see it very clearly, and I've mentioned this as well, and that is Intensity by Dean Koontz, where China has to survive this absolutely horrifying serial killer, an absolute psychopath who has no respect for anyone, for human life, and this is a great book. Now for the movie, I don't know how many of you have heard of this movie. I love Quentin Tarantino. He's always got strong female characters. You've got Kill Bill, and in this particular movie it is Grindhouse, and it is called Planet Terror, and I think it's a very underrated horror movie, where the heroine ends up getting a machine gun for a leg, and it is darkly humorous and funny and gross, and I just love it. It's a real B movie. Quentin Tarantino does a double feature B movie show, and this is half of it. So that is Grindhouse Planet Terror. Okay, I've chosen for number 5 another favourite trope of mine, and that is serial killers. Psychopathic serial killers. I'm not interested in slasher movies so much, but I am interested in sick, twisted, depraved, demented people that have just gone off and will kill for their own pleasure and do whatever they want for their own pleasure with no remorse and no regret. And I promise you I'm okay. I'm not that kind of person. I'm just interested in that's all. And I also like the idea of getting inside the serial killer's head so that you can think their thoughts and you know what they're thinking when they commit these crimes, and it's really kind of sick and depraved. I also enjoy sociopaths. Now, the difference between psychopaths and sociopaths. The psychopath is seemingly very normal on the outside. They've probably got a day job, they can probably do their thing, they've got no problem. A sociopath often loses control, and is also just as sick and demented and will do things. But they're likely to get caught a little bit earlier than a psychopath. And one of my favourite books that deals with a psychopath, a beautiful female psychopath, and that is Heartsick, where this woman, this beautiful woman, kills 200 people before she gets caught, and she tortures and mutilates them and kills them, and when she doesn't kill them herself, she uses some of her lovers to do the job for her. So yeah, this is kind of quite a demented book. I think I've spoken about it briefly, but it really is a favourite. Okay, 2 examples of movies about serial killers is Wolf Creek, with a particularly psychotic killer, and based on a true story as well. And then you got American Psycho, although I've also heard that the book version, which I haven't read yet, is a lot worse than the movie version. Number 6, we got unexpected endings and unexpected twists in the tale. And this is something very specific that I really enjoy. Not necessarily that the good guys always have to win. Sometimes evil survives. Sometimes evil wins. Who knows? I like a little bit of unpredictability in my novels. And I know Stephen King is very, very good with this. He's not known for many in finishing a novel particularly well, but I enjoy his endings, because sometimes they are ambiguous and you don't really know what you just read at the end there. This creature might still be alive. Okay, a book that's got an excellent twist in the ending, or an unexpected ending, is A Long Walk, which is a novel by Stephen King. Now, I always thought it was a novella, but thankfully someone corrected me, and that would have been on my list in my last video if I'd known it was a novel. And it's an awesome book about this marathon walk, and very, very dark all the way through. Now, 2 movies that I think are absolutely brilliant, and one that is just an absolute incredible subversion of the whole genre of, cabin in the woods, slasher movie, kids getting hunted down and killed. Halfway through the movie, 3/4 of the way through the movie, it's just a moment like, what the hell just happened? You go down the rabbit hole, believe me. And the ending is also very unexpected. Another movie is Jacob's Ladder. Now, this is a seriously underrated gem. This is an awesome movie, and it is very, very disturbing and harrowing in parts, and you don't see the ending coming. Next up, from the subgenre of cosmic horror, we have the trope of terrifying, invincible, unstoppable mad gods and monsters, where you know that if they awaken or they find themselves on Earth, that humanity will be lost. These are unspeakably terrifying mad gods. And there are 2 books. There's one book, or there's one author that is particularly synonymous with this particular theme, and that of course is Lovecraft. And I've chosen The Call of Cthulhu. Cthulhu. I'm probably saying it wrong. Someone please correct me in the comments below. And this is just awesome. And I'm going to be doing a video soon on my favorite novellas and short stories from this author. So you must stay tuned for that. And so I have one movie to show you for this particular trope. And that is something that is severely underrated in my opinion. It's like a horror stroke sci-fi stroke cosmic horror space movie, and that's called Event Horizon. It's a movie that was slated by critics, but it's got a real fan base and a real cult following, and I advise you to give it a watch. It's well worth the effort. Okay, the next thing that I like to read about is absolute madness. It sort of ties in with serial killer stuff, but this is someone who just ascends into complete madness and basically gives into despair, and where there seems to be no hope, the point where nothing can happen, but sometimes it does, and saves him. And the book that I've chosen for that is not a horror book. It's not a horror novel for a change. It's a fantasy series, and I've got the third series here. I have the other two as well, and that is Stephen Donaldson, the Thomas Covenant Unbeliever. And it is the whole theme of this novel and the series is about despair, because a forefather of this land destroyed the land, and people that are in fear of that happening again, of someone falling to the depths of despair. This is wonderful. I haven't spoken about fantasy on my channel, but I really particularly enjoy Stephen Donaldson. A movie that deals with a particular scene with absolute and utter despair and madness is 1408, when John Cusack, as you know if you've seen the movie, I'm not going to give too many spoilers here, but he loses his daughter, and this hotel room, the dead daughter, and John Cusack, and something happens, and it is horrifying, it's terrifying, and you just see mentally he collapses. That is 1408. Okay, ninth position, we have a nice fun one, nice light-hearted one. It really comes out of nightmare fuel, and that's the idea of being eaten alive. Now, I said in another video my fears were drowning in a cave, trapped. I think I have to rethink that. The idea of being eaten alive by monsters, by bloodthirsty demons, by, hey, hordes of zombies, that is absolutely terrifying to me. Kind of fun to watch it and read about it. It happened to other people, but it is not something that would be so much fun to happen to you. Now, I've got one short story taken from Poppy Z. Bright, Are You Loathsome Tonight? And it kind of subverts the story of Jeffrey Dahmer. And it is kind of sick and kind of gross and involves eating, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Okay, for movies I would recommend first of all another underrated, it's actually a Spanish film, and it's called Rec, R-E-C, about these zombies. And it's more absolutely terrifying than gory, but I would strongly recommend that. Another movie I'd recommend is Night of the Living Dead, the original, the black and white version. Oh, there's one scene in the basement of this house where you find this little girl chewing on something. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, lastly we have horror comedy. Yeah, okay, this is a little bit of comic relief, but it is a very difficult thing to do well. It's a very difficult trope to actually combine the two with the right. Are you writing more horror? Are you writing more comedy? What are you actually focusing on? I really enjoy focusing on interactions between characters, especially children, in a horrifying setting where maybe they crack jokes at each other, and it's a little bit of relief from the terror that's happening around you. And surprisingly, one person who does that very well is Stephen King, and in particular in it. There is warmth and heart in this novel, not just blood and terror and horror. A movie that absolutely captures the idea of a horror comedy, in my opinion. And no, it's not Zombieland. My favorite movie, one of my favorite movies, horror movies of all time, is Shaun of the Dead. has that perfect blend of horror and comedy, and the two work so well together. And if you haven't given it a watch, what are you waiting for? It is just an awesome movie. I think I've seen it about 10 times by now. So there we have it, everyone. Those are my favourite horror tropes. What do you think? What are some of your favourite horror tropes that you find in fiction or in movies? Please let me know in the comments below. And be sure to like and subscribe. I always appreciate that. Now take care of yourselves, keep those pages turning, and cheers.